I knew it was wrong from the very first second. But when his lips touched mine, I didn't think about guilt. I only thought, finally, I feel alive again. This isn't a story about what's right. It's a story about what's real. About a woman who thought her marriage was safe until a stranger's touch awakened a part of her soul she thought had died long ago. Before we begin, let me ask you, if one forbidden moment could make you feel alive after years of just existing, would you take it? If you've ever stood on that edge, hit like to support the stories we're too afraid to admit are true, and subscribe to hear the ones that make you ask, is everything right? Really worth living for Willow Lane, Maine, summer 2014. The mornings here always smelled like sea salt and brewed coffee. That summer, the air was heavier than usual, the kind of warmth that lingered in your hair, that softened the wood of porch steps and made hydrangeas bloom like they had secrets. I was 52. A former art teacher retired early, not because I had to, but because I had nothing left to prove. Greg, my husband of 27 years, worked as a regional bank VP. He wore tailored shirts, drank his coffee black, and traveled too often to places that sounded important, but always felt far away. Our house sat at the edge of Willow Lane, a sleepy coastal town in Maine, where neighbors still waved and grocery clerks still knew your name. It was the kind of place where routine wasn't just expected, it was sacred, safe. Until Eli arrived. Eli was 23. The son of Greg's childhood best friend Michael, who passed away in a car accident when Eli was just a teenager. After that, Eli lived with his grandparents in Rockport, not far from us. We hadn't seen him in nearly 4 years, not since he graduated high school and disappeared into whatever came next. That morning, Greg mentioned him like it was nothing. "He's back for the summer," he said over breakfast, stirring his coffee, like always eyes still on the local paper. "Wants to work. Said he's good with his hands. Maybe he could fix the fence out back. Save us some money." I nodded, half listening, buttering toast. I didn't think about it. Not then. Later that afternoon, Eli arrived. He pulled up in a battered green pickup truck with a dented fender and windows that barely rolled down. When he stepped out, I didn't recognize him. He was taller, broader than I remembered. His shoulders filled the doorframe when he walked in. His hair was longer now, sun-bleached at the ends, his skin a little darker. There was a steadiness in his movements, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He smiled, and I remembered him, only younger, skinnier, more awkward. That boy was gone. "Hey, Mrs. Martin," he said, voice low, warm. "Thanks for letting me help out." His handshake was firm, not too tight. His eyes met mine, not in a boyish way, but with ease, comfort, like he belonged. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being dramatic, that this feeling was just the shock of seeing a boy become a man. Nothing more. Greg walked him to the backyard, explaining the broken gate latch, the garage door that always stuck in the summer. I stayed behind, standing at the kitchen sink, watching through the window. The glass was a little fogged from the heat, but I could see the two of them clearly. Greg in his tucked-in polo and khakis. Eli in a gray t-shirt, sleeves rolled halfway up, jeans low on his hips. I wasn't staring. Not really, just observing. My finger traced the rim of my coffee mug slowly. There was a tightness in my chest, a pull. Not desire, not yet. Just awareness, like my skin remembered something my mind had forgotten. That night, everything was as it always was. Greg fell asleep early, mumbling something about emails and an early flight the next morning. I lay next to him, staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead, counting the rotations like they meant something. Sometime after midnight, I slipped out of bed. The house was dark still. I padded quietly down the hallway barefoot. I told myself I needed water, that the heat was keeping me up, that it had nothing to do with the shape I'd seen move past the hallway light hours before. Nothing to do with the low hum I'd caught just for a second when Eli passed me on his way to the guest room. The door to his room was slightly ajar. I paused, hand resting gently against the wall. Inside, I heard the shower running, water striking tile, the soft echo of steam curling around skin, the rhythm of footsteps across the bathroom floor. He was humming, a careless, quiet tune, half sung, like something that had no lyrics but lived inside him anyway. I stood there too long, frozen, listening. It felt invasive, intimate, like I'd stumbled onto a moment that wasn't mine, like I was a stranger in my own hallway. And still, I didn't move, not right away. When I finally did, I walked back to my bedroom with a glass of water in hand and a pulse too loud in my ears. Greg stirred as I slid under the sheets, his hand brushing my waist out of habit. His touch was gentle, familiar, lifeless. I closed my eyes, and all I could hear was water on tile. The next morning, the air was warm and still. I stood in front of my closet longer than usual. My hands paused over a plain linen blouse, then slid past it. I chose the pale yellow sundress instead, the one with the thin straps and soft fabric that skimmed my waist when I walked. I hadn't worn it in 2 summers. I told myself it was because of the heat. I pulled my hair back, loosely, letting a few strands fall by my face. Just enough. I added a touch of lipstick. Not red, just color. When I stepped into the kitchen, the light streaming through the windows made everything look softer. The kettle whistled. The toast browned. My heart tapped against my ribs like it had a secret. Eli was already outside fixing the fence. His back was to me as I stood by the sink, coffee in hand. I watched him through the glass. His shirt clung to the sweat between his shoulder blades. His arms moved with precision hammer-nail measure. There was something calming in it, something hypnotic. And then he looked up. His eyes found mine through the window. He didn't flinch. He didn't look away. I should have, but I didn't. I held his gaze just for a second too long. That evening, we had dinner on the porch. Greg had taken a late conference call inside. He was pacing the living room laptop, open voice, clipped and focused. Eli and I sat at opposite ends of the table. The air was thick with the scent of grilled vegetables and the sound of cicadas. "You look different today," Eli said. I looked up. "Different?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "Lighter. Like you remembered something you'd forgotten." My fingers tensed around the stem of my wine glass. I didn't respond. We didn't talk much after that. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was aware, like the kind of silence that stretches right before lightning strikes. When Greg finally joined us, the moment folded away, like it never happened. Later that night, after Greg went to bed, I stayed up to clean the dishes. I heard footsteps behind me quiet. I didn't have to turn. I knew it was Eli. "Let me help," he said softly. I handed him a plate. Our fingers touched, just briefly, but enough. "I'm sorry about earlier," he said. For what I asked, not meeting his eyes. The way I looked at you, it was... I shouldn't have. I paused, then looked at him. "You didn't cross the line." His breath caught, his jaw tightened, Something shifted in his posture, like the air had gotten heavier. And then slowly, deliberately, he stepped closer. His hand hovered by my arm before it touched, just barely grazing the skin above my elbow. I didn't pull away. His other hand rose to my cheek, hesitant fingertips brushing lightly, like asking a question. I nodded, barely. And then he kissed me. It wasn't rough or hungry. It was careful, tender, like he wasn't sure I'd stay. His lips moved, gently seeking rather than taking. My hand rested against his chest, feeling the beat of his heart echoing mine. I don't know how long we stood there. When we parted, I didn't speak. Neither did he. He backed away slowly, his eyes lingering on mine. Then he left the kitchen without a sound. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he had stood. Over the next few days, I lived two lives. By day, I did laundry, watered the garden, answered Greg's texts. By night, I stood in front of the mirror trying on old nightgowns. Some I hadn't worn since my 30s. I ran my fingers along the curve of my collarbone. I watched the way fabric clung to my hips. I wasn't dressing for anyone. Not Greg. Not even Eli. I was dressing for the woman in the mirror. The one I had forgotten existed. The next night, Greg left for another trip. 3 days. Maybe 4. I said all the right things. I smiled. I kissed his cheek at the door. That night, after midnight, I stepped out onto the porch in my robe. The moon hung low, bathing the lawn in silver light. The breeze was warm and soft, brushing against my bare skin. He was already there. Eli stood at the edge of the porch, leaning against the railing, arms folded. He didn't turn until I stepped closer. When he saw me, his eyes softened. We didn't speak. I reached out my hand, brushing his. His fingers curled gently around mine. He stepped closer, so close that I could feel the heat rising from his body. And then, just like before he kissed me, this time it wasn't tentative. It was certain. Slow, deep aching. My arms wrapped around his neck. His hands found my waist. The kiss deepened our bodies, pressed together, molded by something old and urgent. We kissed like people who had waited too long. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against his. "I don't know what we're doing," I whispered. "I don't either," he said. "But I can't stop thinking about you." Neither of us moved. The next day, we went to the store together. It was supposed to be innocent. Groceries. Nothing more. But everything felt charged. Every step. Every glance. We reached for the same box of cereal. Our fingers touched. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. In the parking lot, before we got in the car, he paused. "I shouldn't do this," he said. "I know," I replied. But when we sat inside, parked beneath the shade of a tree, he leaned in. I met him halfway. The kiss was different. Slower. Heavier. Like confession and temptation wrapped into one. My hand found his jaw. His thumb brushed my cheek. When we pulled apart, we didn't say a word. But something had changed. A point had been crossed, no longer theoretical. No longer safe. That night, when Greg called to say goodnight, I listened to his voice and answered like I always did. But part of me was still in that car, still tasting the warmth of Eli's mouth on mine. I moved around the house like normal, but nothing felt normal. The kitchen was too still, the mirrors too honest, my body too awake. Later that night, I waited. I didn't tell him to come. I didn't have to. The soft knock at the back door came just after 1:00 a.m. When I opened it, Eli stepped in. His eyes met mine. We didn't speak. The kitchen felt like a sealed world, quiet, dim, almost sacred. Only the hum of the fridge broke the silence, and the way the night air slipped through the window made my skin prickle. I stood barefoot, robe loose, around my frame, barely tied. When Eli stepped in, the air shifted. He didn't ask. He didn't speak. He just looked at me like I was something he'd craved longer than he could admit. In 3 steps, he was in front of me. His hands found my waist, then my back, pulling me against him, the knot of my robe loosening with one tug. His breath was warm at my collarbone lips, tracing the skin just above my heart. "I've wanted this since the second I saw you at the window," he murmured. I didn't say a word. I pulled him closer. He lifted me onto the counter like I weighed nothing, his hips pressing between my legs, his mouth searching mine with a hunger that felt deeper than lust. His hands slid under the robe along my bare sides, anchoring me to him as our bodies aligned, need against need, heat against heat. And then we stopped pretending. My legs wrapped around him. My fingers clutched his shoulders. And in that quiet kitchen, under soft yellow light and the breathless rhythm of 2 people no longer denying we crossed a line we swore we wouldn't. It wasn't fast. It wasn't rough. It was desperate and slow. Like 2 people starved for something they didn't even know they were missing until now. His name left my mouth in a whisper, and everything else faded: the sound of the fridge, the guilt, the years of silence. All that remained was the warmth of his skin, the gasp between us, and the knowing we had done it. Right here, right now. And there was no going back. The morning Greg came home, the light in the kitchen was soft. His suitcase sat by the door like it always did. His voice was warm, familiar. He smelled like hotel soap and worn cotton, and the same cologne he'd used since 2008. When he kissed my cheek, I smiled automatically. I played my part. He told me about the conference, about the dinner, the drinks, the early flight. I nodded at all the right places. I poured the coffee, buttered the toast, wiped down the counter twice. When he touched me that night, it was gentle, considerate. The kind of touch you give someone you've known so long the map of their body is memorized and no longer mysterious. I let him. I lay there with my eyes closed, arms where they should be, hips rising just enough, breath time to match what I thought he needed to hear. And all the while, my mind drifted, not to Eli's face, not to his hands, but to how I had felt in the kitchen, alive. When it was over, Greg kissed my shoulder, whispered, "I missed you," and rolled away. I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny cracks in the plaster, and thought, I'm not who he thinks I am anymore. The house felt quiet again. Too quiet. The chairs, the walls, the linens, all in their places, but something had shifted. Or maybe it was just me. I moved through the days like usual. I did the shopping. I returned calls. I asked Greg about his work and listened like I used to. But every morning, I stood a little longer in front of the mirror. I began choosing my clothes more carefully. Not for Greg, not for Eli, for myself. I tied my hair higher. I wore lipstick, even when I wasn't leaving the house. I polished my toenails a soft pink. I rearranged the vases. I played music while I cleaned. I wasn't preparing. I wasn't waiting. I was waking. Eli stayed away for a few days, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of respect. Or maybe he was just testing the air, waiting to see if it had cleared. It hadn't. When he finally came back, it was unannounced. A soft knock on the back door. I opened it without hesitation. We didn't speak. He stepped in. I stepped back. And like before, we found each other, with no need for words. But this time, it was different. There was no frantic tearing of clothes, no grabbing, no rush. He moved slowly, carefully. His mouth found mine, as if he'd missed more than just my skin. His hands held my waist, like something precious not stolen. He looked into my eyes when we moved together. Not over me, not through me, into. My body softened against his welcoming, needing. His name left my lips like a breath. My hands clutched his back, not in desperation, but in longing. When we finished, we didn't let go. We stayed curled into each other on the living room rug, sunlight pooling on the hardwood around us. He traced small circles on the inside of my wrist. My heart was too loud in my chest. I turned my face toward his. "This isn't just lust," I said, almost afraid of the words. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes had already said it, and that's when the fear bloomed in me. Because for the first time, I didn't want to stop. Later that night, I stood at the kitchen sink washing a single plate. The house was still. Greg was asleep upstairs. The clock ticked softly behind me. I felt the pressure building in my chest, the quiet knowing that something had changed in a way I couldn't undo. I looked down at my left hand. The gold band had been there for 27 years. Through fights, moves, Christmases, funerals. Through silence. Through habit. I reached up and slipped it off. My fingers hesitated just for a second before I set it beside the faucet, the spot where I usually placed it while washing dishes. But this time, I didn't put it back on. I walked away. Later, I passed the hallway where the wedding photo had sat for years. Greg in his navy suit. Me in a simple dress, smiling like someone who believed everything was ahead. I paused. I don't know why. I lifted the frame. I didn't smash it. Didn't cry. Didn't say a word. I just turned it face down and walked away. Not angry, not ashamed, just quiet. I didn't end things with Greg. I didn't confess. I didn't run to Eli either. This wasn't a story that needed a dramatic exit. This was a slow undoing, a quiet reawakening, a reckoning. Some stains aren't loud. They don't leave marks you can scrub out with truth. Some stains change the way light hits a surface. And once you see it, once you feel it, you can't unsee it again. I still make the coffee every morning. I still fold the laundry. I still smile when Greg walks in the door. But I do it differently now. Because I know what it's like to feel invisible. And I know what it's like to feel seen. And once you've been seen, truly seen, you never forget. Greg still doesn't know. He still smiles when he walks through the door each night. Still wraps his arms around me from behind while I'm chopping onions at the counter. Still calls me sweetheart, just like he always has for over 20 years. And I still answer. I still kiss his cheek. I still say goodnight when the lights go out. But I'm not the same woman I was. Some changes aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They simply shift. Quietly. Deeply. Permanently. I started listening to myself more. Not the loud thoughts, the quiet ones. The ones that ask, do I feel beautiful today? Does my skin still hum when someone looks at me that way? I used to think those questions were indulgent. Now I think they are survival. I haven't left. I haven't told Greg. I haven't run to Eli, and I don't know how many nights like that are still ahead of me. I don't call it love. I don't call it sin. But I know this much. Once you've been seen, really seen, you can't go back to being invisible. And that stain we speak of, sometimes it's the first sign that something inside you is alive again. I used to think peace was the greatest achievement in a marriage. Now I understand there are things more vital than peace, like being touched, not just by hands, but by eyes, by attention, by the full weight of someone truly noticing you. I don't know if I'll be able to keep everything, or if I'll lose it all, but I know this. The next time Greg leaves for a work trip, I'll still be here, standing in this same kitchen, watching the sunlight stretch across the counter. And I'll be thinking about one thing, only one: how to live like someone who still wants to be seen. Before we end, I want to ask you something. Okay. What do you think is more dangerous, quiet loneliness or forbidden desire? And if it were you, could you return to who you were before that summer? If this story stirred something familiar inside you, a memory, a question, or maybe just a quiet ache you didn't know had a name, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if these kinds of stories speak to you, real, emotional, human, don't forget to subscribe. There are more waiting to be told.